y'all, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Taya and this is Taya's Turning Pages. So by the title of today's video, you can tell that this is going to be my favorite romances of all time. Now, as you guys have probably noticed if you watch my videos consistently, I don't normally film a lot of favorites videos in terms of like my favorite thrillers or my favorite romances, my favorite nonfiction, etc. And that's only because I started reading for fun again back in July. So I'm still trying to play catch up and figure out which books are my favorites. But I do feel like I have a good pile or selection of books here that I can confidently say are my favorite books of all time or my favorite romances of all time. So I wanted to share those with you guys today because Valentine's Day is coming up. So I figured why not film this video and again, share my favorite romances with you guys. So that way you can hopefully pick up some gems and also give these books some support because these books are great. Now, some of them are very popular, but there is, I feel like, one or two in here that I don't see get enough hype and they deserve it because they're amazing. So yeah, we do have quite a few books to get through, so let's get started. I'm not gonna go in any particular order. These are my favorites for a reason and I don't really feel like going through the headache of ranking them. So the first book that I have here is The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. And I actually read this book way before I joined Booktube and Bookstagram. And I don't remember the exact year this came out, but I read it when it first debuted. And this is a story about a young woman named Carolina who is a wedding planner and she's really, really good at what she does. And one day she strikes up this conversation with this woman who owns this hotel. And this hotel is notorious for throwing extravagant weddings and hosting extravagant weddings. And Carolina, being the businesswoman that she is, she decides to essentially sell herself to this woman to let her know like, hey, I'm the best wedding planner in town. I would love to collaborate with your hotel, etc, etc. This woman is really impressed with Carolina's pitch, so she decides to tell Carolina to put together a formal pitch so that way she can go back to her bosses and hopefully bring Carolina on as like, you know, their like wedding planner. And so on the flip side of this, you also have Carolina's love interest slash rival named Max, and Max is a marketing expert and he's also the brother of Carolina's ex-fiance, so they can't stand each other. They really don't have, you know, good history or anything like that. But as time goes on, these two find themselves having to work together because again, Max is a marketing expert and he does work for this hotel, and Carolina of course is trying to become the official wedding planner of this hotel. So you get to witness these two getting up to shenanigans and starting to fall in love along the way. So I did really enjoy this book when I first read it, and as you can hear, the plot is a little bit convoluted but it is a really fun and interesting story. And yes, you do have that situation where the MC does fall in love with someone that is technically off limits. I really love that in romance books. I feel like it gives it more spice, it gives it more fun and more angst and more tension, and that's exactly what this book gave. I wouldn't say that they were real enemies to lovers. Carolina definitely hated Max and it showed, and it made sense as to why she didn't really like him, but Max never really disliked Carolina. So it was definitely one-sided, I feel like, but it was still a really good book nonetheless. There's also a forced bed, like close proximity trope in here, so if you're interested in the one bed trope, this definitely has it. And then again, this is also, like I said, an enemies slash rivals to lovers trope. So if you're interested in all of those, I definitely recommend picking this book up. This book is also very diverse. I really loved the different representation that is in here. I think Carolina is Brazilian American, I'm pretty sure. So this book was just really, really interesting in terms of learning, like, you know, a little bit more about the Brazilian culture and the foods. And Carolina's family owned this Brazilian shop where they sold foods and snacks, and it was just so interesting to read about, and I really loved that aspect of the story. I know that Mia Sosa is coming out with a new book this year, and I think it's called The Wedding Crasher. I'm really excited to read that one because this one, like I said, easily one of my favorite romances of all time. Next book that I have here I feel like needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce it anyway because it's one of my favorites. And it is Beach Read by Emily Henry. So this book I read last year like pretty much everybody else, and I fell in love with this story so much. This story follows two young writers, one named Augustus and one named January. January actually writes romance novels and Gus, I'm pretty sure, writes literary fiction. So these two couldn't be any more different. They're also rivals slash enemies to lovers, so they're not really like the biggest fan of one another. But these two find themselves in the same small town over the summer because they both have to write books in their respective genres, so that way they can send their manuscript and everything like that to their publishers. But they're both encountering writer's block, so they decide to retreat to this town unbeknownst to the other, and they decide to retreat to this town to lock themselves away in their respective houses to try to really sit down and figure out what their next novel is going to be. Well, they try to stay away from each other and really not interact, but of course it's a small town, so they do end up interacting, and they kind of get into this argument. January decides to say to Gus, I bet I can write a better literary fiction novel than you can write a romance novel. Well, Gus decides to take her up on that bet yet, and the story pretty much takes off from there. So this is a enemies / rivals to lovers situation. Now I want to say this is more so rivals, and honestly I feel like that's even kind of like because January can't stand Gus, but Gus, you can tell from the very beginning, doesn't necessarily hate January. He's more so just kind of like indifferent towards her, but that's neither here nor there. Either way, I really love this story. I thought that this was such an interesting take on a romance. To me, this does fall into that women's literary fiction type of category as well, but it of course has romance elements into it. But I really enjoyed this one. Like I said, Emily Henry has such a distinct voice, and she really does a good job at writing witty and funny characters. I felt like the banter between January and Gus was so entertaining, and I love seeing these two kind of spar in terms of their words. And I also just really like the exploration of grief, as well as losing a parent, as well as just, you know, losing yourself and finding yourself again through your writing especially. As you heard from those talking points, this book does dabble into serious topics, so definitely look up trigger warnings before you pick this up. But again, really love the fact that this not only focused on the romance, but it focused on real life issues. I thought that these two characters were amazing, and I will always go up for beach read. I tried to read People We Meet on Vacation and I DNF'd it. I hated it. I did not like that at all, but this one was right up my alley. So like I said, if you're into enemies and rivals to lovers, and if you're into romance books that have a little bit more oomph to them and not just focusing on the romance, I think that this is the perfect book for you. Next book that I have here, again, really needs no introduction, and it shouldn't be a surprise if you watch my videos consistently, but it is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. Y'all knew I was gonna have to throw this in here. I'm always going to talk about this book no matter how many years go by, because it's just great. It's great. Like, the girls that get it, get it. So this book follows a young woman named Piper who is very charismatic, very bubbly, and very outgoing, and she's also a social media influencer, so she has a huge platform. And Piper does live off of her stepfather's income, so she is pretty much just like living the high life, but she doesn't really have to pay for it. And she gets into some trouble, and her stepfather is really fed up, so he decides to send her to this small town that her biological father grew up in. Her biological father passed away, but he does send her to the small town so that way she can understand the worth of $1 and what it means to work for your own money, etc. And Piper's sister Hannah decides to join her, so they go to the small town and they realize that it's not going to be what they thought it was going to be, because it is a small, local, really homey, really rugged town. It's known for crab fishing, so the locals here are very, like, you know, nitty-gritty and just really like outdoorsy, you know, and that's just not Piper. And on the flip side, you have her love interest named Brendan, and Brendan is like the top dog in this town. He is the crab fisherman king, I'm pretty sure they refer to him as. He has his own boat, he has his own crew, and he is the one that pretty much brings in the revenue when it comes to crab fishing for the town. So Brendan has a lot of respect and a lot of clout in this town, and him and Piper couldn't be any more different, and they cannot stand each other when they first meet. Brendan is very type A, he does not like change, and when he sees Piper and Hannah stroll in, he is very annoyed and very frustrated, and he cannot stand these two. Piper, who is very nice and very kind to everyone, also finds herself not being able to stand Brendan. So every time these two meet up, it's always a clashing moment. They always butt heads, but as time goes on, they start to get to know each other more, and they start to realize that they're not as different as they thought they were, and the story pretty much takes off from there. I love this book, obviously. This was displayed on my bookshelf back there for a long time because I just love this book so much. I love how Tessa Bailey wrote Piper's character in particular. I've said this before, but I feel like there are so many romance books out here, and just books in general, where the main character, who is a woman, is described as high maintenance, and a lot of the other characters poke fun at her, they bash her, or she kind of puts herself down because she is high maintenance. And I like that Tessa Bailey didn't take that approach here. She let the reader know that Piper was high maintenance, and Piper also knew she was high maintenance, and she didn't care. She let you know that she liked the finer things in life, and I just really like that. I like that there was a different take on the whole high maintenance Park Avenue princess type of situation. I liked it. And it also helped that Piper was a really caring and kind person. She was so sweet, and it was just like her bubbly personality just radiated throughout the entire story. You felt it. She was definitely one of those characters where people would say, oh, she lit up the room whenever she walked in. That was definitely Piper. And then Brendan, Brendan was not the nicest person. He was very misogynistic, honestly, and again, not the nicest person, but y'all know how these romances go. These male characters do get redemption arcs throughout the story, and I feel like Brendan's redemption arc was pretty good, it was solid, and I just love these two characters. The steam in here was amazing because you guys know Tessa Bailey is like the queen of smut, so this book did not disappoint in that department. And again, it was just a beautiful love story. I definitely will be rereading this sometime this year. I'm probably going to annotate it because I just love these two characters, and I really want to be transported back into this world. And I know Tessa Bailey is coming out with a sequel to this that will follow Piper's sister Hannah, and I'm really excited about that one. But these two, of course, made me fall in love with the series, so yes, definitely always have to plug this one and recommend it. So the next book that I have here is one that I actually just finished, and I talked about this more in depth in my January reading wrap up, so I will leave that linked up above in the cards somewhere or down below in the description box, so I won't spend too much time on this. But the next book is Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. So this book was amazing. So this story actually follows a young woman named Danica Brown, who is a PhD student, and she's also a teacher. She works at this college, and in this particular building that she works in, there is the security guard named Zafir, and him and Danny are pretty good work colleagues. Every single time Danny comes in, she gives him a cup of coffee, he gives her a granola bar, and they talk for a little bit. Danny goes on about her day, and Zafir goes on about his day. And one day there is a fire drill that takes place, and Danny, being Danny, doesn't realize that it's happening, so she gets out of the building a little bit too late. And while she's trying to get out of the building, she decides to take the elevator, and she gets stuck in the elevator. And so Zafir comes to her rescue. He does save her, and he carries her out of the building, but Danny is a little bit injured. I think like her hand or her leg got injured, so that's why he's carrying her out of the building. But while they're walking out of the building, they're too wrapped up into each other to really notice that other people are recording them, and this video of them coming out of the building goes viral, and now these two are thrust into the social media limelight, and they're trying to navigate it and as best as they can, and they're starting to realize that they're going to reap the benefits of going viral, because Zafir is not only a security guard, he also owns his own nonprofit organization where he does help children, and he really wants to get more exposure for this organization. So he asks Danny, will she play along into fake dating him while he gets more exposure and more sponsors for his organization. Danny of course agrees, and the story pretty much takes off from there. I love this. Of course, this was a phenomenal book. Again, I'm not going to go into my full thoughts here. If you want to know more, definitely look at my January wrap up. But these two characters, I love them. I thought the chemistry was great. I thought the steam and the smut in here was also really great, and I really love how Talia Hibbert wrote these two characters. I snorted and laughed at 90% of the things that Danny said. I just thought that their banter was so witty and so clever, and I really enjoyed it. Very reminiscent of Emily Henry in terms of just that like back and forth banter between these two characters. But this isn't an enemies to lovers situation. This is more so like a acquaintances slash work colleagues, like office type of romance situation going on in here. But either way, I really enjoyed the story, and I definitely can't wait to read more by Talia Hibbert. The next book that I have here, I'm actually not going to go into full detail because I did read this for February, so I will be talking about it more in my February wrap up, and I will be submitting this information for my Blackathon like team for Team Romance. But I still wanted to share this book with you guys because it's great, and it is Sweetham by N.G. Peltier. So if you guys actually watched my top 22 books of 2022 video, you will know that I included this book in that video because I've had this sitting on my bookshelf for a long time, and I finally got around to it, so I'm so happy I'm able to cross it off the list. But this is a story that is set in Trinidad, and this follows two characters, one named Charisse and one named Kieran. So Charisse is known as the sugar queen in her hometown because she owns her own bakery shop, and she's really good at what she does. She's very sought after so many people in Trinidad to cater their parties, their weddings, their brunches, because of how delicious her desserts and her treats are. And then on the flip side of that, you have Kieran, who is in the music industry, and he is a DJ slash a producer, and he works with big time and local time artists. So these two are really well respected in their fields, but they don't respect each other, and they cannot stand each other. So they have known each other since they were children, and their dislike and disdain for each other did stem from childhood, and it was brought into adulthood. But moving on, Charisse's sister Ava is getting married, so she does make Charisse the maid of honor, and the groom Eric is best friends with Kieran, so he does make Kieran the best man. And these two, as you can imagine, get thrown together in certain situations, and they have to learn to put their differences aside and make sure that they deliver the best wedding that they can to two of the people that they care about the most. I thought that this was a great book. Obviously, it's in my favorites for a reason. I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was so cute, and I love the diversity and the representation in here. I've never read a book that was set in Trinidad, but this book genuinely felt like it was a love letter to Trinidad and Trinidadian culture, and I just thought it was so sweet. I love when books and authors, you know, do those little things in their books and they show love to their homeland. I just think it's really cute. But yeah, Charisse was an amazing character. I thought she was so funny and so relatable and so authentic. I thought the dialogue between Charisse and Kieran was phenomenal. I really loved the witty banter and how these two went back and forth all of the time. It was really funny to see these two kind of rile each other up. It was just really funny to witness and watch. But yeah, I really enjoyed this story, and this is a series, and this is book 1 in the Island Bite series. There is a second book that is actually available on Kindle, and I don't know how I'm going to read that because I don't have a Kindle. So I'm hoping that there will be a physical copy of that book very soon. But either way, this is a really good book. I definitely recommend picking this up. The steam in here was pretty good, and I just love Charisse as a character. I thought she was so relatable and so authentic, and I laughed out loud at a lot of the things that she said, because a lot of the stuff that she said I felt like I would say too if I was in that situation. So I really loved her character, and you could sense her and Kieran's angst and tension, so I thought the chemistry was pretty spot on. And I really wanted to say really quickly that I enjoyed how Ng Peltier fleshed out the side characters. I feel like a lot of the times in books, especially romances, the side characters are just used to help drive the plot. They're really just a device for that. But I felt like in this one, all of the side characters were fleshed out really well and they had their own storyline. I was invested in learning more about them and who they were interested in the story, and hoping that they would get their own sequels and spin-offs. So everyone actually delivered something and they weren't just there to be used as a device to drive the plot. So yeah, really enjoyed this one and I can't wait to read more by this author. So the last book that I have here, I'm actually not going to go in full detail about because I have talked about it in so many different videos because it is my favorite book of all time, and it is To Selena with Love by Chris Perez. So I am a huge Selena fan, like a huge mega Selena fan. Anybody that knows me personally, like in real life, knows that I am like a huge fan of this woman. Her and Beyonce are like my queens, so yes. But this is a story, or I guess a biography, written by Chris Perez, and this pretty much just documents his life with Selena on and off the stage. For those of you who do not know, Selena Quintanilla Perez was a Mexican-American singer who was in the Tejano music industry more specifically, and she also had a band called Selena y los Dinos, where Chris Perez was her main or lead guitarist. And Selena was really popular in the 80s and the 90s. She really grew to stardom because of her charismatic stage presence. She was a great dancer, a great singer, and she just knew how to put on a show. She was a great entertainer. Again, that's why her and Beyonce are like my queens, because they are very similar in that regard. But yes, she was a very great entertainer. But unfortunately, she was murdered in 1995 by the president of her fan club, and her death is still being felt 20 plus years later by her friends, her family, and her fans from all across the world. But her legacy and her memory is still being kept alive, because I'm sure you guys have seen the Netflix series called Selena, as well as the MAC Cosmetics line that came out in her honor, as well as just so many other accolades and awards that she's winning posthumously. And for that, as a fan, I'm really grateful that her legacy, like I said, is living on. But yeah, this book pretty much just documents their relationship and how they even met, how they got together, and how hard it was for them to even become a real couple because of Selena's father. Her father was very strict, and her father had very high expectations and standards when it came to who was dating his kids, but especially Selena, because she was the baby of the family and she was of course the breadwinner essentially of the family. So her father was very protective of her, rightfully so. And so him and Chris just really did not get along in the beginning, but as time went on, her father realized that Selena was in love with Chris and these two could not be kept away from each other. So they did end up getting married, and again, this book just follows their relationship, and Chris just does such a phenomenal job at really pulling at the reader's heartstrings, because he really pours his heart and soul into shedding light on what Selena was like on and off the stage, but more so off the stage. If you are a fan of Selena, you do know the whole Queen of Tejana persona that she of course exudes on the stage, but off the stage you really get to get another glimpse into her and what she was like. And Chris talked about how she was a daredevil, how she was a prankster, and how she always loved to laugh, and she just liked to have fun. And honestly, seeing her through interviews, you could tell that that was the type of person she was. So I'm glad that Chris was able to confirm that through so many different stories and recounts of their time together. But yeah, this book was heartbreakingly beautiful. I cried, especially towards the end, because that's where Chris really talks about how her death impacted him in his life. And I just really appreciate him for writing this book, because he didn't have to do it. He didn't have to. This did come out in 2012, so years after Selena passed away. But I'm really grateful that he did give us a story, and Selena fans can read this book time and time again, learn more about their love story. So yeah, there's so many different things that I could say about this book, but I'm not going to get into it because I've talked about it so much. But if you're a fan of Selena, definitely recommend picking this up. There are pictures in here with the two of them, but also just like pictures of Selena on her own. I'm trying to pull up one, but here's a picture of them right here. Just beautiful. And there's just so many great quotes and great statements that Chris has in here, and I'll read one really quickly. But right here it says, Selena loved as hard as she lived. We loved her in return, her family, her friends, her fans, and me, her husband, who felt like the luckiest man alive every time Selena said my name. This book is for her. So that is just a glimpse into what you're going to get in terms of the writing style and the writing and the emotion and the love that is really radiating through this book. I can't say enough great things about it. So yes, just pick it up if you're interested in romance and beautiful love stories and Selena. Right, y'all, and those are all of the romances that I wanted to recommend in this video. I really hope you were able to find some gems. Definitely let me know if you do plan on picking any of these up, or if you have read any of them in the comments down below. I would love to know. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me and my channel out. And lastly, please make sure you follow me on Bookstagram as well as Storygraph. I will leave all of that information linked down below in the description box, as well as at the end of the video, like I always do. I hope you guys have a happy Valentine's Day or Galentine's Day, however you are celebrating it. I just hope you have a good one, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!